Hello, everybody. And to everybody attending today's webinar, I just want to say welcome and thank you for joining us for today's PA Presents webinar in collaboration with the Hillman Library team. My name is Tyler Welsh, and I'm the Associate Director for Campus Constituent Relations here at the University of Pittsburgh. Before I pass things off to our presenter for today, I do just want to go over just a couple housekeeping things. If you experience any technical issues, knock on wood, hoping that we don't, you can visit support.zoom.us. And lastly, and most importantly, you'll see a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. This is an interactive webinar, so you are welcome to ask any questions at any time by punching questions into that Q&A box. So our presenter will present for about 40 minutes or so, and we'll leave some time at the end to address any questions that you may have. You can enter them while she's presenting, or you can enter them at the end as well. With that being said, I've talked enough over here, so I'm going to pass things off to our speaker over here. So I'd like to officially introduce Kornelia Tancheva, who is the Hillman University Librarian and Director of the University Library System here at the University of Pittsburgh. So we're excited to have you join us today, and I will pass things off to you, Cornelia.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Tyler, for the introduction. We are very grateful to PAE for including us in their lineup. And everyone, again, thank you for coming. On this slide, I have included my email address for any follow-up questions, but I also do hope that we will have enough time at the end, as I'm going through my presentation for you to ask me questions. Please do not hesitate to interrupt and ask questions. On the next slide of the presentation, which is not moving on. There you go. I have included the description of the webinar. You must have already have read it because you registered for this webinar, so I will not repeat the description. I just want to make sure that you're all in the right webinar. The one thing that I will note, though, is that although the overall construction of Hillman Library is scheduled to be completed in May of this year, we are actually planning on having a grand opening ceremony in the fall of 2025 during homecoming. So we hope that many of you will be able to take at the very least, an in-person tour, or at least join us for the grand opening. So, the library that you remember, depending on when you graduated, the Hillman that you may remember has changed a lot. And I have included a few pictures that some of you might remember. But I have a funny story about this one. As you can see, it says microforms. So it literally took me at least an hour to find somebody who remembers this particular microforms desk at Hillman, where it was. We all know what it was doing. It was providing help for people who were using the microforms. But finally, we did manage to locate it, and we did manage to find out the year that it was actually taken away. So it most definitely wasn't here when I started as the University Library System Director in 2017. And it was dismantled, so to say, in the early 2000s, and it was on the second floor of Hillman. The other pictures from the library that you may remember this one is from the first floor of Hillman. And then the next one is from the ground floor. I'm sure that this you definitely remember if you have graduated in the last 10 or even 15 years. And I will have an occasion to return to these pictures later on and say a few words about them. In the following slides, you will see some of the changes that have already happened or are happening at this moment. So things have changed a lot. And here is a picture of the fourth floor of Hillman. You will see the stacks. In the background, you will see the students sitting on at the tables and doing their work. So it is a picture of practically the same activities that you saw in the previous two pictures. On the next picture, you will see the third floor right before it opened again with the stacks in the background and the different type of study spaces in front of the stacks. You also see some of the group study rooms to the right. On the next one, you will see one of the most iconic at this point. It's funny to talk about iconic in only, what is it, 4 years since this particular one was finished. One of the most iconic spaces in the new Hillman. Our book lab, or the official title of this space, is the Text and Context Lab, in which you will see on the left side a printing press, which is fully functional, and there's another one behind it that is not visible in this picture that you can actually use to print books. Again, I will have the occasion to return to this space later on, so these are just a few pictures as an illustration. And then the next few pictures, too, I think, are going to be from the first floor. The first floor right before it opened, and then with students in it. In the background to the right, you also see the student-run cafe, Sagsby's, which has several locations on campus, and Hillman is the second most popular one. So here is the renovation timeline. Believe it or not, it started in 2018, and in 2019, the fourth floor was done. The renovation was floor by floor, usually one floor at a time. But as you can see, after the third floor was done in 2021-23, we had to do two floors at the same time, the second and the first, because of the particulars of the building. The two floors are connected in a way that we wouldn't have been able to do them one by one. So that's why it took 2 years. And in 2023, we started the final stage, which is the ground floor, the core of the building, which includes the elevators, the bathrooms, and the terrace outside of the building. So the projected inside construction completion is in May 2025. I've done presentations on the Hillman renovation for, I don't know, as long as I can remember, because this has been my life at Pitt. So this particular completion date actually, sorry about my phone here. This particular completion day moves in time. So for the time being, it's May of 2025. We are fairly confident that the construction crew will meet that completion timeline. The terrace will be done afterwards because they need a little bit better weather to work on the terrace. And then during the summer, we will move all the staff and equipment to the ground floor and also move all the people that are currently in temporary spaces to wherever they belong. So what I want to stress here in particular is that all the time that the construction has been going on, the building has remained open with students and staff inside. So everybody's work has been tremendously disrupted, and practically no floor at this moment in time is completely finished. There are temporary walls all over the place, which will then be taken down before we declare everything completely done. And there are dozens, literally dozens of art pieces that we've stored at our facility at Thomas Boulevard that are coming back. So don't be fooled by the preponderance of white walls. There's furniture that is moving around because we don't have enough space for the furniture that is supposed to go on the ground floor, or some furniture that's supposed to be on the first floor is now on the second, and things like that. So the furniture layout will be completely different. And once we are done in 2025, you have to keep in mind the fact that the design was done in 2017. That is 8 years ago. So the running joke that we have, but it's really not a joke, is that once we're done with the ground floor, we'll have to go back to the fourth floor, and then the third, and then the second, and then the first, and then the ground, and so on, to reassess what has changed in the intervening years, what has been successful, and what still needs to be done. Because one of the hallmarks of our renovation is the fact that it is based on user assessment needs. We've done focus groups, we've done surveys, we've done observation studies of how people do their work. But as I said, it's been 8 years since we first started. Okay, so let me tell you a few words about the reasons behind the renovation. First, the state of the building. It had old or frankly non-existent HVAC system with temperatures and humidity that were varying so widely that there was never a completely comfortable spot. But also the HVAC system was on its last legs. And there was the very real danger that it could go down suddenly, completely, and then the whole building will have to be completely shut down. If this happened, we had no backup plans. So the building had to be renovated. And for those of you who remember their time on campus and did study at Hillman, you probably remember that there were never enough outlets. So we had to do constant retrofitting to accommodate the needs of patrons, and sometimes that retrofitting was plain dangerous and against code. But more importantly, forget about the building itself. More importantly, two other things had changed, which had profoundly changed the research, teaching, and learning enterprise, the way that people did their work, and the advent of the digital revolution. So research libraries, at least in the United States, I like to specify this because research libraries in the whole world have a different arc of development, but research libraries in the United States, as we know them, were like fortresses on a hill that contained all the knowledge available in their stacks. Of course, all, as you saw, I put in quotes because it was never all. But we know how people like to generalize, so let's say all the knowledge. And the stacks were closed. I don't know if any of you remember at this point that research libraries initially were open only to faculty and some graduate students. Graduate students actually had to have permission by their advisors or the faculty that they were taking classes with to go into the stacks. In fact, when I was doing my PhD, the stacks at Cornell were closed. So I was the only person in the stacks when I got permission to go use them. But eventually, stacks in research libraries were open to undergraduate students, and the need for different spaces arose. And then something else happened. While before you needed mediated access to the resources, a librarian who was basically holding your hand until you found what you needed, with the internet, it became ever easier and in some disciplines actually preferred to access resources online. Think about the sciences. And the explosion of electronic resources affected the use of physical collections, which plummeted down And research libraries found themselves with floors of stacks of books that were rarely or ever or never used, and a constant demand for more spaces, especially group study spaces that they couldn't meet. So at some point in the 1990s, and again, this is a gross generalization, research libraries began transferring unused or rarely used collections to offsite storage and creating the so-called learning commons, basically tables and chairs with electrical outlets, if possible, for patrons and their computers. Or the library provided computer labs. That's what the ground floor of Hillman was, a computer lab and a learning commons. So as the availability of electronic resources spread, research libraries also found that we were basically building the same collection, despite the fact that we had something called resource sharing, which you know as interlibrary loan. And it was at this point that the focus shifted from creating the same general collection over and over and over again in the different research libraries to acquiring, providing access to, and preserving archives and special collections that are unique. And in the process, research libraries also opened up their doors to local communities interested in these special collections and archives or in general engagement with the research enterprise. And the other transition was, of course, from analog to digital scholarship and products. So here you have some of the changes in what faculty and students do, because what is constant is that students still write papers and faculty still write articles and books, but they may also want to make a digital map of the changes to, let's say, in our case, the Oakland campus over time, or use artificial intelligence algorithms to synthesize and summarize vast amounts of information on their topic of interest, or describe and work with the vast amounts of data that their lab produces, create a 3D printed version of a new design for a bridge truss, record a podcast or produce a short film, understand the opportunities and challenges that artificial intelligence and machine learning present. And these are some random, basically, examples of what has changed. So the new Hillman Library has the spaces, technology, and expertise to support this hands-on learning, this team-based learning, experiential, that is through doing, learning, as well as digital scholarship. And this is what I'm going to show you today. The next few slides present some of these opportunities. On this slide, you see the manipulation of a scanned image in our open lab that I will talk about as a space and its opportunities later. On this one, you see a workshop on creating pop-up books and paper marbling in our book lab on the third floor, again called Text and Context Lab, which is our collaborative space with something called Center for Creativity on campus. Here you see a class in archives and special collections where classes have increased tremendously. Students and instructors love engaging with our unique materials to do research, to illustrate their curricula, and they keep coming back. Professors bring the class once and then they bring it a second time, and then students come on their own to do their own research. The next illustration is of an event that is engaging with the archive of August Wilson. Again, I will say more about that particular archive. Bringing in people that are not Pitt affiliated, in this case, local students and teachers in the high schools. So, some of the principles of the design of the Reinvented Hillman Library are: all the spaces that we create have to be flexible and technology rich. They have to support various working and learning styles. We have carrels for individual work, tables for individual work, tables for two, tables for four, tables for six, tables for eight, reservable rooms for group study work that accommodate up to 5 people, that accommodate five or 8 people. Graduate student only spaces for people, for graduate students who are at the writing stage of their dissertation, and maybe they don't have offices in their departments, or they cannot write at home. So we provide reservable spaces for the semester. The spaces that we create have to support this hands-on learning that you will hear me talk about mentioned many times today. And they have to provide training and programming that creates expertise in new skill areas, whether it's artificial intelligence or it's data, digital cartography, entrepreneurship and commercialization, audio and video production, just to name a few. The spaces also have to support engagement with our unique archival materials, both physical and digital. Libraries in general are poised and will continue to be poised on this almost like nobody's land. I specifically did not use no man's land, but that's the concept that I have in mind. They're neither wholly analog nor completely digital. I think that for the foreseeable future, we will be somewhere in between. So we have to support both of those modalities. And we are trying to provide a connection to the natural world with a lot more light, um, natural light, with views of the greenery outside. There will be terraces with the trees and the ability to sit outside, and there will be a lot more color. Remember the comment, the design or the complete renovation is not ready. You're looking at the white walls, but this is not what they will look like when all is said and done. So you might ask, in all of those principles of renovation and creating all of those spaces, where did the books go? Well, they're here. They have not disappeared. They're on the third and fourth floor stacks. They're on the lower shelving on the ground through floor 2. And they're at Thomas Boulevard climate-controlled storage facility. The physical items from the Thomas Boulevard facility are sent back to campus in under 24 hours. But if the request is for an article or a chapter of a book, these are scanned and sent back to the requester the same day. And I actually have a picture of the high bay facility. In the foreground, you see the storage for special collections in those archival boxes. In the background, you see the boxes in which general collections are stored. And you also see that we have a larger capacity, a lot of shelves that are still empty. We actually did some sort of a projection based on the number of physical items that we are getting each year, how many years of storage for our collections we have. And it was something like, depending on what we are moving, between 7 and 10 years. So I'm not going to worry about where we are putting our collections for the next 7 or 10 years. People are fascinated by these pictures, by the way. Okay. So then let's talk in specifics about the things that we have emphasized in the renovation. First, we emphasized, as I mentioned, the archives and special collections. And I will say a few words about how we specifically acquire archives that are of local, national, and international importance. And we'll highlight 2, but I just want you to remember that I'm highlighting 2, and we have hundreds of other archives. The two that I'm highlighting are the archive of August Wilson and the archive of George Romero, because they illustrate one of our ways of keeping archives living, not just putting them somewhere in storage and never getting them used except for the couple of researchers that will come a year. We want our archives to be something that all students, all faculty, and the community at large engage with. So, the August Wilson Archive, we acquired it in 2020. I actually still remember that the boxes arrived when the university was closed because of COVID. So we had to make special arrangements. It was processed in record time and it opened to the public in 2023. And I say that it was processed in record time because there are 450 archival boxes with everything that you can possibly imagine. There are drafts of different scripts for his plays. There's publicity for each of the plays. There are over 700 notebooks, handwritten notebooks by August Wilson himself, who was putting down ideas, thoughts, paragraphs of both plays and other writings that he did. By the way, I don't know if you are aware that he also wrote poetry and hundreds of speeches that he did once he became a well-known national figure and a Pulitzer Prize winner playwright. So for the August Wilson Archive, we actually received a $1 million grant from the Hillman Foundation, the local Hillman Foundation, to focus specifically on outreach to the local community with it. And what we have been doing, this is a picture of local high school teachers and students engaging with the material. So they come, spend weeks on end, usually during the summer, with our archives, and the teachers are supposed to have two outputs. They have to incorporate the materials from the archive or materials from the archive in their curriculum, and they have to produce lesson plans that are available freely online for other teachers anywhere in the country to use. And the students have complete freedom as to what their output is going to be. After their research fellowship in the archives, they can write a presentation. They can write a scholarly article if they felt like it. They can write a play. They can paint a painting. They can put together an exhibit. We don't really limit this because we want them to use the archive as an inspiration. So, of course, we are also engaging local Pitt students, but also drawing researchers from all over the country, and not just researchers, but also artists and theater practitioners. We actually had a theater group from Philadelphia who used the archive, spent some time there, and produced a one-man show based on the material that they found. So here you see an illustration of an art project that students in the local schools did based on their reading in the archive. The concept of a living archive is really very dear to our hearts. We want people from all walks of life, so to say, to use our archives and special collections. And while August Wilson is more of a intellectual and artistic archive, the next one that I want to talk about, the George Romero archival collection, actually has a built-in fan base, which I'm sure you know. So George Romero was a horror movie genre pioneer. He was a director and writer of movies like Dawn of the Dead, Night of the Living Dead, and so on. And he is extremely socially relevant. even though for a certain period of time he was only known for the horror movies that he created, there's actually very deep social commentary on it in them. At any rate, we used his archive to, oh, and this is a prop from the archive, to start building a much broader horror studies archive where we emphasize horror creators, horror genre creators. It could be writers, it could be movie figures, it could be in any area that are coming from underrepresented groups. For instance, we are focusing on women horror writers, or horror from Asia, or African American horror writers. So I just want to tell you an anecdote here. Maybe a couple of years ago, the Stoker convention was in Pittsburgh. Stoker, as in Bram Stoker, the author of Dracula. And we just did a reception for them so that they can see some of the items in our horror studies archive. And I was talking to a number of women, four, whose archives we already have because we have actively worked with them to acquire those archives, women horror writers. And one of them, a very well-known African-American horror writer, told me, uh, thanked me for the work that we are doing in this genre and said, now I can never be erased because I'm in the archive. So that, as you can imagine, warmed my heart a lot. So these are some other examples of the horror studies archive that we have. But I just want to caution you, I'm highlighting two archives, but we have so many others. We have a very large number of music, specifically jazz and gospel archives. We found, for instance, the wooden plates that were used for printing the music of a publisher of gospel called Charles Pace, who lived in Pittsburgh and was a very well-known figure at the time. But because no sheet music survives, his music is no longer performed. So our archivist in the music library found the printing blocks. We printed the music and we worked with a local choir who produced a concert in the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Pittsburgh. So this is how we are using the archives to actually not just make them available for research, but also for the benefit of artists, creators, and the local community. Okay, I'm going to move on to the experiential learning spaces because I can talk about archives forever. So let's take a look at some of our already existing experiential spaces. I'll focus on a few that are already functioning and very popular, but also mention a few that are coming up on the ground floor, the ones in parentheses, the research interactive wall, the technology lab, the digital scholarship lab, the media suite. These are all things that are coming up either on the ground floor or the research interactive wall is going to be on the first floor. All right, the text and context lab is a quintessential example of what we consider a maker space in a library should be. It's a space where things are made, hence new skills learned, but the things are connected to what libraries do. So what can you do in the text and context lab? You can make paper, like actual paper. There are workshops that you can take in order to learn that. You can print books. I mentioned the printing presses. You can learn how to bind books. Again, an art. You can learn how to illustrate books. You can learn marbling techniques. If you know what marbled paper is, if you think of old books, the way that they are covered, inside the cover, you see very colorful paper that is very unique. The design is very unique. This is called marbled paper. You can learn the art of book plating. You can learn calligraphy. And you can also learn book engineering because pop-up books actually are engineered. And all of those workshops, or the bulk of the workshops that are offered in the Text and Context Lab, actually use materials from our special collections and from the Fine Arts Library, which has an extensive collection of artists' books. For instance, I'm going to show you something that I made, so please don't judge, okay? This is the product of a collage workshop that I took there that used material from the August Wilson collection. And I just happened to have a picture with the widow of August Wilson, which I put on the back. You know, it's my product. I can do whatever I want with it. So here are a few examples of the text and context. You can see the marbled paper in the foreground here. Another space that is very popular is the Open Lab on the first floor, which is a collaborative space with the Center for Teaching and Learning, and it has cutting-edge technologies and expertise in using them. And it's used for curricular and extracurricular purposes. They have prepared the video, which I'm going to show you. Hopefully, it will all work. It's very short. I'm going to stop here and ask the people who are monitoring the chat, are there questions in the chat? Is there something wrong? Because I had somebody pop into my office, look at my screen. Are you not seeing what I'm seeing?
Yeah, we see you. I think you're okay.
Okay,
You had a
cool.
black box popped up, but we were able to see
The
the
black
video.
box
So.
popped up. All right. All right, but hopefully you're seeing the main picture.
Yes.
All right, so there are a few more illustrations from what's happening in the Open Lab. Here you see the 3D printers. And then I'm going to move on to Hillman Library as a showcase for scholarship and creative output and say a few words about the first floor digital interactive wall that I mentioned. I'm also going to say a few words about the student art throughout the building and the third floor digital wall student curated exhibits. So I already mentioned that on the first floor, there will be an interactive wall showcasing research output at the university in a visual, engaging, expert layman's terms. This is an artist rendering, so it will look something like that. We hope that its purpose will be to publicize all the wonderful things that researchers and student researchers are doing at Pitt, but also to produce curiosity in all the students that come to Hillman so that they can think, oh, if other people can do that, I can engage in research too. So we are very excited about it, and we are going to work on this again in partnership with the Office of Research and the Office of Undergraduate Research. And then I want to say a few words about the student art that we showcase throughout the building. This is a Victorian gown that was produced by a student in studio arts who looked at the instructions contained in our special collections, and we exhibited this for her for the academic year, so that on the one hand, she gets exposure as an artist, but on the other, we also showcase student creative output, which is something that we have throughout the whole building, and we'll have more of it. This is an example of something called the Schneider Award that we give to 3 or 4 students in studio art who have already been selected to exhibit in their annual showcase by a jury of faculty in fine arts. So we go look at all the pieces that have been selected, and we choose ones that we think are representative of what we want to do with student art in the building, and exhibit those for the academic year. And finally, our digital wall on the 3rd floor that is connected to archives and special collections. It has 6 different panels. And when we opened in 2020, by the way, we were ready to open in March, so you can imagine what happened in March 2020. All 6 exhibits were curated by our archivists. At this point, 4 of those 6 are always curated by students, individual students, students working through their classes, students working through their student groups. There's a waiting list for people who want to use the digital wall to curate an exhibit based on our archives and special collections. All right, on the ground floor, we will have a number of spaces that are dedicated specifically to media production and creative expression, based on the very successful equipment lending program that we already have. And these spaces include the Calderon Media Row, which contains the Media Lab audio, editing booths, and the One Button Studio. And the capabilities of those spaces are varied, but basically recording of interviews, podcasts, voiceovers, dialogue, narration, sound effects, video editing, and color correction. The One Button Studio is precisely this. You go in, you press a button, you can do a podcast, you can do a video of yourself, then save it on a USB device and take it home and do whatever you want with it. There's also going to be a Media Lab film, which will allow students and faculty to film scenes, interviews, objects with controlled lighting, camera placing, green screen, black curtain, and on and on and on. So many different ways to not just learn the art of digital and analog media production, but also complement teaching, learning, and creative expression. So these are some pictures of the spaces as they're being built. They're not ready because they're on the ground floor. And some of the equipment that will be available there. So obviously, all the things that I'm telling you emphasize things that are different from what you may remember. However, it is important to note that the library continues to provide support for research and skill building for our students, even though the nature of these activities might have changed. So there are many different programs that we deploy in those spaces or outside of those spaces. And one of them that I want to highlight is the library support for internships and research awards. So we provide the opportunity for students to have semester, summer, or whole year internships in areas like archives and special collections, information technology, digital scholarship, the open lab, whatever they are interested in. where they work on a project for the library as if the library is a real life client, so that when they are done, they can put something on their portfolio that says, I worked on this system, or I produced this exhibit, or I produced whatever it is. So there's a list of our internships, fellowships, grants, and awards for our students, both undergraduate and graduate students. You can find them there. And one of the most popular ones that we have is the Archival Scholars Award, which is a collaboration with the Office of Undergraduate Research, where the people who get the award, the undergraduates, develop an independent research project with support from a faculty member and a librarian or archivist member using materials from the special collections. And the final product could be a presentation, could be a paper. This year, as you can see on the left, this year we are asking them to actually contribute to a digital interactive wall exhibit. And these are some of the winners. You will see here this student had worked on a medieval manuscript, illuminated manuscript, but this one has worked on a scientific project, something that they found in our archives. And for graduate students, we also provide the opportunity to do the 3-minute thesis competition, where they're supposed to summarize their dissertation in 3 minutes for people that they meet in the elevator, so to say, so that they answer questions like, what is your research about? Why is it important? Why should I care? It's extremely difficult. I can tell you that. 3 minutes. So what does all of that mean for you? You can visit our libraries during all of our open hours. You can access Pitt, our online library catalog. You can consult with one of our subject experts or functional experts. You can use our archival text and images that have been digitized. We have major collections like Historic Pittsburgh. We have major digitization projects in our East Asia libraries. You can attend one of our workshops or events. Finally, if you're interested in a presentation on Pitt or Pittsburgh history for your alumni club, we actually do that for alumni clubs, and these are very popular. People want to find out or to remember, maybe there's an element of nostalgia about the history of Pitt or some aspect of the history of Pittsburgh. So if you want to do that, we can do that as well. Or you can bring your club to the library for a customized tour. We have an Ask Us service that you could use. And with this, that was a lot of talking. I'm going to say thank you and ask for comments or questions. And at this point, stop sharing so that I can see what's happening. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Cornelia. We'll give you some jazz fingers. We appreciate that. Yeah, we do have a few minutes left. Yeah, we have some clapping emojis coming in. That was very helpful. We do have a few minutes left if anybody has any questions that they want to submit into the Q&A. A couple we answered while it was going on. Yes, this is being recorded. We will have the recording as well as resources links. We'll share out with you within the next few days so you can review this. Also, hopefully slide decks, different links will be available. We had questions about where we can find the list of calendar or list of workshops and events. That was on the last page that you shared there. So we can make sure to share that out so you can see everything else coming up. One question that we do have right now for our alumni, do alumni need a card or a membership to access resources or books?
It depends. If you're asking about electronic resources, Again, it depends whether we are talking about digitized materials that we have digitized and put freely online, or you want access to our electronic resources that we have bought through, I don't know, Elsevier, EBSCO, whichever one, all the science journals, for instance. In the first case, you don't need anything. You can just go and access the resources. In the second case, in most of the cases, in the overwhelming amount of cases, the answer is no. You cannot access them remotely, but you can always access them if you are on site. So our licenses are not open to alumni remote access, but they're open to walk-ins, is what we call them. It's very difficult to negotiate even for walk-ins, but we're drawing the line there. So yes, come in, you can use everything.
Sounds good. And I know that was one of the questions that we had and that will be shared in the link. What are the open hours or times that alumni are available to come in?
So if you're coming on your own and you don't really want anything specific from us, like a tour or a meeting with anybody, all the hours that the library is open, except after 11 at night, between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m., you have to have a valid Pitt ID. So they will stop you at the end, but I'm just not imagining that you all want to come at 11 p.m. or after, right? We're open 24/5. Otherwise, you can come at any time. But if you would like a tour, if you would like to meet with somebody, if you would want to know more about the space, yes, you can walk into the space, but they may have, I don't know, a workshop of some sort, so there's nobody to take you around. So I suggest that you contact either me, you have my email, or Marcy, and we will organize it for you.
All right, great.
And
Sounds
I think
good.
I saw raised hand somewhere. Monica, I think was the name, or maybe
Yes,
that
if
was
you're
one
still
of
on
the.
here, Monica, we can unmute you. I'm not there's no raised hand at the moment. They must have
Okay.
unraised it. But if they still have a question, before we conclude, I'm just going to launch a quick poll for everybody attending. So before we hop off, or if you have another question, feel free to punch that in too. But if anybody can just click number on the poll, it's greatly appreciated for our feedback. And again, you're welcome to reply when we send out our follow-up email, one with any questions or additional feedback that you have as well. So I do see a handful of you working on the poll right now, so thank you. That is appreciated. Um, and I'm looking, we don't have any other questions in the Q&A right now. So we'll just give another second if in case anybody has anything else. Um, but with that being said, if anybody does have any extra questions, Cornelia did provide her email contact, so you are welcome to follow up offline if something else pops up as well too. Um, but with that being said, it's pretty much all we have for today. So Cornelia, thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for all this. I know I learned a lot. I'm excited to come back to Hillman and check everything out over there. And if you have any last thoughts for us, feel free to share. But again, thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming. And again, thank you, Tyler.
All right. Well, thanks again, and thank you, everybody. Have a good day. Take care.
Bye.